Welcome. Lovely to be with you on our first recording of 2025. Um, there's a few things on my mind, but I want to remain consistent or truthful to how we said we were going to check in, and I definitely feel a need to just take a few moments of silence and just breathe with you to get into this space. Is that fine with you?
That's beautiful, Rincha. I'm going to put ourselves a timer and I'm going to check in with you. What's feeling right? A minute or you happy with 30 seconds?
I think I need a minute.
Okay. I'm putting a timer on so we don't get carried
Thank
away
you.
because I think we can when we go to stillness.
Yes.
That's our minutes up.
Thank you. That was an amazing 1 minute. Just reminds me how powerful silence is.
Yeah.
Okay, my mind, that as much as that was still on this side, inside, there was so much that came to me, and that I can't wait to talk to you about or to share with you today, and to see what we make of it. Where do you want, how do you want us to start? Where do you want to start?
Hmm. So I think the first thing is that minute was like really lovely for me in terms of stillness and in our precursor to this conversation when we were just catching up, one of the things we talked about is the differences in our experiences. And I think, that's one of the things I want to hold through our conversation is how we might all be moms, but each of our experiences are very different, and to hold and honor that. And in terms of where we start, I think perhaps starting around what our intention was for this recording,
Mm,
and where we find ourselves. Um,
yes.
so yeah, so I think Rensha, our intention for this time, we've got a bit of a schedule, and our previous conversation, we had a mommy moment as well. We were at time, and you had a commitment to go fetch your child from school, and we felt that we hadn't really ended the conversation, and so we considered doing part two to continue and talk about some of the things maybe we didn't get to around Women's Day. Um, and then when we did our catch up today, as we're recording, we're literally back to school, right? It's day three of school as we record this. And I think you and I just found ourselves in the presence of the reality of that for parents and for moms. And so our conversation, our catch up conversation was, like we said, almost a podcast itself. And so we've decided to continue that conversation here, with an audience. And I guess there are two things around that for me. The one is helping normalize the experience that we're not in it alone, and just creating space to talk about it, and to feel supported in it. And I think the second is very much part of us, who we are as individuals, or who we strive to be as individuals, who we are as a collective, and what the motherhood stands for. And really just, creating space. Um, so you might have a plan, you might have a schedule, you might have all these ideas and thoughts around what needs to be done. And yet in the moment, you know that there's something different that needs attending to.
Yeah. Yeah, so first, thank you for meeting me there this morning and going, yes, we still have an intention to record. Yes, we had the perfect plan. We put a lot of thought and effort into the plan and deciding what we're going to record when. And then to arrive here this morning and go, and both of us feel um, convicted to just be authentic and to speak about what is present for us as opposed to sticking to our plan. And that in so many ways is representative of where I find myself as a mom. I'm a planner. I love to be in control. My diary is planned for the whole year. It frustrates me if the schools don't communicate their plans, which I'm sure they have, so that I can slot it into mine. Or if they change their plans without consideration of the impact that it has on my life. And in that, I realize that I can be frustrated by it and I can blame everyone around me for it, or I can do what we've done today to go, yes, there's a plan. It was a perfectly well thought through plan, considering the information we had. And here we are today, and that isn't the best plan anymore.
Mm.
And accept it and work with what is. So yeah, I think that the fact that we could, I guess, pivot is what some would call it, but just for me and my language that feels more authentic is just to acknowledge what is in the moment and to accept and go with that, as opposed to trying to hold on to my predetermined plan, is actually
Mm.
what brings peace and a lot more lightness
Yeah.
into the day. But yeah, I think that finding that balance between controlling things, organizing things, planning things, being in control, being responsible, and then being agile to respond to the constantly changing reality and the needs of everyone around us is probably one of the life lessons that still to learn through this journey of being a mother and
Mm.
trying to be a mother and a wife and a working professional.
Mm. Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. As you were speaking, the word that came up for me when you said pivot, and I thought, yeah. Um, and then you gave what felt right for you, and the word for me was almost honoring what is,
Mm.
because there's such a, even as I thought the word, I felt like goosebumps, come up for me because it is so much about that. It is so much around, the planning for me, feels very head stuff. And I'm a planner of note, right? I scripted my wedding from start to end for the officiating priest. But um, I think that letting go, and knowing when to let go. There's sometimes you can't let go. You want to, you know that there's something else that needs attention, but you can't let go for various reasons. And I think that knowing is something we talked about is when do we allow ourselves, almost want to say give ourselves permission, but that in itself sounds problematic. But I think allow ourselves to let go when there's space to, and sometimes how we create the boundaries, we hold ourselves to those standards,
Yeah,
and we put the pressure on ourselves, you know.
yeah.
Um, I want to make it a bit more practical. Sorry, you want to say something?
No, and so maybe my head is also going towards a practical because as I hear you say that again, that what resonates with me is the relinquishing of control when it when the attempt to maintain control is actually what becomes stressful. And so I had an experience this week with my children growing. So my daughter is 15 now, my son is in his last year of primary school. And so their independence is becoming more and more prominent. Now, my daughter's always been fiercely independent. I've never had issues with her because she didn't allow me to do much for her, to be all completely honest. My son, on the other hand, was a typical youngster, and I did everything for him. So that relinquishing control, when I'm now noticing he has a desire to become more independent, is something that was actually quite practical for me. Before we went on our last holiday trip away, we bought all the stationery. And in the past, he hated stationery marking. I needed to do it for him, or he bribed his sister who loves doing it. And suddenly, so on Monday, I noticed, without me telling him he had to do it, without him, I just noticed he himself switched off his computer game and he started marking his own stationery. And I looked at this in awe, and there was the part of me that goes, but I want to help. You didn't even ask me for help. And so yes, that pathetic helper in me, I was like, I didn't feel needed. And I needed to check myself there to go, I couldn't control it. I could see he's writing so ugly. No one's going to actually see that it's his. But I needed to check myself to go, I don't need to control this. So I was able to actually acknowledge him for doing it. Let him know that if he needs any help, I am there, or his sister is there. But when he indicated that he's perfectly fine to do it on his own, although it's not by our standards, he did it on his own, I could actually sit back and pick up my book, and I needed to distract myself, not to interfere with his process. But I was able to actually let him be independent. And in that moment, I was coaching myself through letting go,
Mm.
relinquishing control over something that wasn't mine anymore. And
Mm.
afterwards, I'm so proud of him that he could do it all. He packed it all. I didn't double check that he had everything. I still see some stuff on his table, and I'm leaving it because it is not mine to control anymore.
Mm.
And so I'm wondering just how many of the other things that I'm finding stressful at the moment might be because I'm trying to control things that either are uncontrollable or that isn't mine to control. And that's just a question that I'm sitting with.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know that I can offer too much advice to the contrary here, because I'm also, yeah, I have issues with control. I really do, and I think, very intense. My need for control is very intense, and of course, I can go to the whole history of psychology of where it comes from for me as a person. But I think the reality is what you spoke into is a good part of the stress comes from the, not the feeling out of control necessarily, but then what we end up doing to try and control, which I think I've also noticed. I can't say that I haven't hit that moment. I've hit the realization, but the action that you've taken, I find that a challenge. Um, yeah, I think for me, Rensha, something that's really sitting with me that I want to speak into is this transition to school, you
Mm.
know, and whether it's related to control or not, or it's really a very stressful time, and I want to share two different experiences that I've had, which I've shared with you. Is my son, as you know, changed schools last year. He was in a mainstream school, and then he had, and he's quite clear on it, and he'd indicated that to us early on. It took us a while to get there, that he wanted to go back to Montessori, and he's a highly independent young person as well. So he's in a Montessori school now, and he's loving it. And when your child's happy, wow, gosh, what a relief. He's a different child. There's no more anger and frustration. There's more of that love again. And in that first mainstream school, start of the year, we got book lists and God, and I mean the instructions, and cover this with that, and buy this one, and don't buy, you bought the lines are too thin or too thick, and it just, I mean, I think of it, and I feel the stress and the frustration. Um, and I'm not saying all mainstream schools like that. I'm giving the example that we had. And it was super stressful. And that perfectionist in me, and my son's a bit younger, as you know, he's 8 now, so he was 6 and 7, when we had that experience. And so the responsibility I feel falls on me. And somehow for me, I feel like I'm being judged. I'm now transitioned. back to being at school. And if it's not done properly, that the teacher is going to make some judgment or assessment about me as a parent, you know. But again, that's my stuff, right? Um, and then, the experience we had, because we changed sort of towards the end of the school year last year, we didn't have the sort of start of year onboarding, and this year we did. And my experience is that there's so much more organization, things are in place, we know what's happening. And the beautiful part, and it's really, I light up when I talk about it, is I didn't have to do stationery. It was part of the school fees. They've got a different model. It gets bought. I believe that they'll send some stuff home for us to cover just with plastic. But, you know, I just sat realizing how much of a difference that made to my experience and my stress levels of having something as simple as that taken off the list. And I remember when we had the list, like going down and trying to buy stationery and how strained and stressed I was. And yeah, I guess I was just having that moment of how things could be different
Mm.
if maybe more schools adopted something like that. And I know it's the system, and I know all systems are different, but I'm just taking from a very personal perspective of the impact it had on me and then on my family, because I had a lot more presence to be with Mika. And like I said to you when we were catching up, I didn't have that need to, I've got to like do this and we've got to do that. So we really had beautiful quality time together. Again, appreciating he's at that age where I can still have that, and he still wants that time with me. So that was an interesting, yeah, I guess realization for me around the start of the school year.
Mm. Yeah, as I'm listening to you, I mean, the very, very practical stuff. And what I'm hearing, you didn't have to deal with this year, which I know is often a big stressor for parents, is that emotional strain of the adjustment of going to a new school or going to a new classroom, or, oh, and that's torture. So if I remember that, then again, I'm reminded that these practical strains are actually, in my view, easier to carry, although yesterday it didn't feel very easy to me. So perspective also just, yeah, I guess helps me to juggle through it. But yeah, there are, I think, a lot that the schools can do to make it easier and in terms of communicating or just taking noise and noise are, very specific. If they are very specific about what they want, then do it. I mean, so one of the things that I was so happy this week is to get a message from the school to go, look, we want you to have this specific mental math book. And by the way, we've sourced it. This is the cost. We're going to just allow you to pay it on the app. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. Because I saw the message and I'm like, oh, now I've got to go and look for that book. And then they're out of stock. Where am I going to get it? So that, again, for me was that relief of, oh, they've made it easy for me.
Yeah.
That, and so yeah, if there's more places that, if I'm listening to your experience, where I know that the schools can make it easier. I know there's other parents that might feel very different about that, and I think that's what makes it complex for them, because they might have been able to source that book at a slightly reduced rate, and they would have preferred that. Where I'm preferring the comfort, and I'm willing to pay the full price. So, and connecting with that, I also realized that as much as it's easy for me to sit here and go, I think the schools can do better. Um, I also have empathy for them in terms of catering for everyone's needs and being flexible around that, which, yeah, I accept is part of why they sometimes don't.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, yeah, and I think you touch on something important. So I don't think it's pointing fingers at the schools. I think the transition is challenging for multiple different reasons, and I think our conversation really is around the variety of different pressures that we experience. And you might think it's just a book list, or like you say, it's just a book to source. But I mean, I remember we were looking for a particular Afrikaans book for grade 1 and 2, and like I phoned and I went to, I think, 5 stores. I phoned and I went to 2 stores because they said they had it, but when I got there it wasn't the correct thing. And I think also relying on our network and parents who've been at the schools longer to kind of go, is it this book or is it not? And, um, and again, it sounds like such a small thing, but when you're going to go back to work, and you and I, we're slightly different because, we work for ourselves. But when you're a parent who's, working in a business or in a corporate or for someone you're employed, you've also got more restrictions. We've got some flexibility, I guess, around, when we start and when we shop and when we do stuff. Um, and then I think also the monetary side of things, you're right with that. I remember in grade one, Mike and I had the conversation. We're like, oh my God, look at the cost of these books. Because when we did our research, we were able to get it, at a reduced rate. And so we chose in grade one to go out and buy the books, you know.
Mm.
But even that, you're spending time and it's stress because you're walking down aisles. And then in grade two, we went, oh God, you know what?
Like
Is
just
it
buy the
really
pack.
worth the effort? We're saving a couple hundred, but my God, are we saving? Like here, we're
Yeah.
saving our marriage because we. I'm like, no, it's this one. He's like, no, it's this one. I'm like, this one has the gold. This one. So we decided
Yeah.
spend the extra money and bite the bullet. So I do think you're right. I think there are different approaches to it, but again, I go on the impact that it has on us as parents, trying to juggle, multiple things to try and get the school year off to a good start. And I mean, we're just talking stationery, but there's uniforms, there's a multitude of things. You've got to start planning lunches and and then the other thing that you and I have in common, I guess, when we were chatting was transport,
Yeah.
you know, and even that,
Yeah.
there's again, Mika's age and stage. As you know, last year I started doing the trip in the last term from Greenpoint out to Bloberg, Sunningdale, and I chose to hang out on that end because trying to drive back to town would take me about 2 hours in the morning and made no sense. So I was in a new area. I felt this hyper vigilance because my laptop is my life and I have it with me and I can't leave it in the car. And then co-work spaces, you can't have conversations like this. And obviously, from a coaching perspective, I need to talk. So there was a whole strain and stress around that. Um, Mike had suggested because I was really, I mean, you and I haven't necessarily had this, but I was really under severe strain, really badly. And Mike was like, well, let's just like find a driver. And I'm like, how, where? Like how? And how are we going to find the money? And so I think there was the money aspect, but that emotional aspect, and I'm coming back to that, what are the boundaries and the expectations I'm putting on myself? I was like,
Yeah.
my child's not even 8 yet. Like I want to be that person. And it's a half an hour drive and we have valuable conversations and I'm not ready to give that up yet. I'm not ready to have a stranger connect with
Yeah.
my child in that way, you know? And it was interesting that Mike and I had this difference. He was more open and ready for it. And I suffered. I suffered through that fourth term. I wasn't able to do as much work as I wanted. Emotionally, I wasn't in the space for it, but practically also, physically there were some challenges. And fortunately, we had a good break. Um, and as we were coming into the new year, I was like, okay, right, I can't do this anymore. And we were ready, and now we've chosen to get somebody to drive Mika. Unfortunately, it's gone well. But even that, the logistics around transportation and weighing that up with, I guess, what we think our kids need from us, how much they need from us, the quantity versus quality. I mean, it's a
Mm.
whole area.
Yeah.
And I know you're very committed to fetching your kids from school and they're older and they've got lots of extracurriculars. So I'm curious
Yeah.
about your experience because I'm sure the people that are listening also have.
Yes. So I'm listening to you first. I'm going, my time with dropping them off is precious time in the car. So I absolutely get that. It's not about the practicality, it's about what you're missing out on. So yeah, I think Yeah, you've made a tough decision. And I know it's the right one, and I can understand why it wasn't easy to get to that point. My challenge and the way my anxiety sit when it comes to transport is I'm the sole Uber, and my two kids, both being quite active after school, often have conflicting activities which finishes at the same time, and they both need to be picked up or delivered. So I'm sitting here and I'm looking at next week. Both of them have swim. Well, the one has swim trials. Will finish at a time where my daughter's having a gala, and I would love to watch her swim. And it's very likely that at that very moment that she will be participating in her event, I have to be at my son's gate fetching him, because at the primary school, when they're finished, you need to fetch them within a 15-minute time frame. So I can't say, I'm just watching your sister's race finish, I'll be there now, because I can't communicate with them and it's not allowed. Whereas that would have been easy if he was also in high school. So high school makes it easier in terms of there's that little bit of flexibility and independence. But in the primary school, I don't have that. So those are my challenges. The one's finishing here, the other one needs to be there, and I can't be at both places. And yeah, Wednesday night, she's got an academic awards evening, and he's got his parents' meeting, both at the same time. So luckily, I'm not a single mom, so we split up. But then I'm sitting with that, who who goes to the award evening and who goes to the parents' meeting. And as much as I'm going, I've been to a few of these parents' meetings, I know I'm not going to miss anything. It's not about that. It's about him feeling like we're choosing his sister's achievements over his school. And so last year, I had exactly the same situation. Last year, played out the same thing. And what I did then was to ask them to go, this is not my problem. It feels like it's a me problem, but it's not a me problem. It is a problem. We have two important things that are happening at the same time. There's two parents. We can be at both, but who goes to which? I don't want to choose, because the choice is going to have perceived implications by you. So I'm actually putting the decision on the table and go, kids, you decide, who do you want at which event?
And did
And
they agree?
they agreed. Actually, my husband stepped into that space, because he then said, you know what, you're at risk at the primary school of being elected class mom. And we know
Yeah.
you can't take that on as well. So I'll go to the primary school event, because they're unlikely to nominate me. So
Mm.
you get to go to the academic achievements, which
Mm.
was lovely. And it was much longer. So when we
Yeah.
were on our walk yesterday, so my husband and I started walking together just to get some physical exercise as well as some quality time together. I said to him, look, we've got the same situation again, and I'm again going to put the problem on the table. And he said, no, you know what, this year, let's just swap around. I go to the
Mm.
academic achievement, you go to, and got to get yourself out of class rep
I was
selection.
going to say, keep your boundaries up.
So yeah, that's how. But it needed me to go, it's not my problem. Because
Yeah.
when I made it my problem and I kept playing, if I pick this, then and if I pick this, then that one's gonna go. I needed to step away from it and going, it is a problem, not my problem. And how do we come to an agreement on how we want to manage this, as opposed to taking the burden on me to problem solve. That
Yeah.
actually was what I needed to release it. So don't know how I'm going to do the gala yet, but at least Wednesday night sorted. That's Thursday's problem.
Yeah, yeah. I think well done. I think, as I listen to you, what comes up for me is this my problem versus a problem. And I even want to go a step further and call it a dilemma, because often that's what we're facing, right? And I love what you did, because the word that kept coming up for me as you were speaking was the word guilt.
Yeah,
And you didn't name it, but it's the emotion, right?
yeah,
Like we feel guilty. And when you said, my kids might make it mean something, what's the emotion behind that? And I was sitting going, what is the emotion? I mean, I'm giving the word guilt. You might call it something else,
yeah.
but it's this guilt that we sit with. And again, we can talk about where the idea that it's our problem comes from. But I think what you offer us in sharing your experience is maybe a different way to deal with it. And as you were speaking, what resonated for me is with this transport issue as well. You know, we we very I guess as a family, and again, I we have this thing that we talk about different families, different rules that we actually got from another family who have a very similar value system to us. And in our family, we involve Mika a lot, you know, in the decisions. Obviously, at the age appropriate kind of information sharing. And when when we talked about this, I explained to Mika, the impact and the importance. So saying how much I love my time with him and it's so precious. And I could see he was feeling it too, when I said, hey, Mika, we're looking at maybe getting a driver and these are the reasons. And again, that it's so easy to take that guilt on to go like, oh, I'm a bad mom and, like look at my child's face and all of that. But what I guess I learned out of it was to give time, to kind of let him know with enough time. Um, and then to talk about it regularly and go like, so hey Mika, this is where we are in the process. And then when we had conversations with the people, we only met two people. We gave Mika the opportunity, to meet also. And it was interesting that all three of us, Mike, Mika, and myself, had a preference for the same person, for very similar reasons. You know, and so again, I said, okay, for the first week, I'll go with, right? Because I'm not just going to hand my child over. Again, the guilt, right? So I was like, okay, the first week of school, I'm going to go with, and I'm going to now go. I don't have a car, right? Once I'm there, because I'm driving with the driver and his car. I'm going to go hang out in the mall for 6 hours of my day with nothing to do. And I'm still on leave, so I don't want to put the pressure of work on myself. Um, and just kind of hang out. And then drive back once the driver's fetching him. And I did it the first day. God, Rensha, I was exhausted. Like I came back and I said to Mike, I can't do this. I can't, it's bringing up all of that strain that I experienced last year, even without having to work.
Yeah.
Just like not being able to rest, it's just not doable for me at the point where I'm at right now. And so the second day, I was like, and Mika didn't get up in a great mood and he was a bit late, and there's all this stuff going on. And again, this thing of my problem versus a problem. And I was starting to feel this like, but I can't, and then Mike actually stepped up and said, but actually, hold on, I'm not coaching this morning. I could go. And I was like, oh, yes. He drove with the driver, and then he took a bus back, and it was fine. So I think
Sure.
that thing of shifting the responsibility, that it's not ours to solve,
Yeah.
we can share it.
Yeah.
And as I share this story with you, I go, what about me has shifted that has allowed me to come into this space? And I think that perspective of not feeling like it's my responsibility solely has helped open up options.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so as I'm listening to you, there's more examples coming up for me, but before, maybe whether I share it or not, we'll see. Before I do, this word responsibility, which is, and so just last night actually I was confronted with, what does the word responsibility mean? If you unpack it, it is the ability to respond.
Mm.
And yet, what's striking me from this conversation is when we overdo taking responsibility for things that aren't ours, we actually deprive ourselves from the capacity to respond appropriately.
Mm.
So yeah, it's like, and it's bizarre for me because the responsibility feels like such a good thing. And when, yeah, I overdo it, I actually interfere with my own ability to respond. So that's just, yeah, I think it is striking for me how we make it into something that it's not intended to be. And so, and maybe some, and that same, it's a slightly different perspective to it. But as my children are getting older, I'm confronted, and it feels like this is very, very likely going to be the theme for me this year is how do I also allow other people to influence my children's decisions, to speak into their lives. For a long time, if they're young, I'm the primary source of their value system, the guide to their decision making, the protector of them, the custodian of their comings and goings. And as they're getting older, that it cannot be, it shouldn't be. And I think in our South African context, where physical safety is a
Mm.
concern, I can feel that there is an inappropriate responsibility on me to be that for them, which actually by design it shouldn't be. And that is often causing strain, both in me and as well as in our relationship. And
Mm.
yeah, sometimes I can't not do that.
Mm.
Where there are then other responsible, valued, aligned
Mm.
individuals that are entering into my children's lives, I'm trying to challenge myself to embrace that and not to be threatened by it. And that's also interesting for me. So my daughter swims as well, and she's got an incredible swim coach. This woman is, I admire her. She's a mom of five, homeschooling all of them. I mean,
Oh,
one day I'm going to invite her to this, but so she has got an amazing way with kids. And so she has gotten into my daughter's psyche in the way that I just have such admiration for. And it's beautiful for me to see how my daughter would allow me to speak into her life to a certain extent, and then she would block it because mom mom is not cool. Mom doesn't know, but she's allowing this other woman to speak into her life, into those areas. So there's been instances this holiday, my daughter was sick and she didn't want to take medication because I want to put stuff into my body. So I actually said to her, I'm going to phone your coach and I'm going to tell her to tell you to take this meds because I know she would have given this to you. And then she
mm.
reluctantly took the medicine. But in so many other instances, I've seen and I've heard the coach speak into her character. And I'm
Mm.
so grateful for that
Mm.
because, yes, values alignment is important for me there. But it also makes me realize that I cannot be the sole, I cannot be the sole person to do that anymore. And yes, her friends will be there, and the teachers does. But my responsibility has now shifted to instead of trying to control, to rather
Mm.
just filter and hopefully guide a little bit more around who are these individuals that are speaking into my children's lives. And so again, there's a few of the teachers at school, some of the other sports coaches that comes to mind, and to help her discern whose advice and guidance to let in and whose to hold lightly, in a way
Yeah.
without speaking ill of anyone, but just to point her
Without
in
judgment.
direction as
Yeah.
well. How do you engage in life and allow some people's views
Yeah.
and opinions and advice to penetrate, and others you might want to go, it's conflicting with me, and therefore I'm not going to allow it in.
Yeah.
That is quite fascinating for me to observe in the space where I am finding myself
Mm.
into.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the two things that you speak about, Rensha, that comes up for me, I think the one is the village.
Mm,
And I think with westernization and this whole thing around us being living in a very individualistic way, we've lost that, right? I mean, in most cultures, no matter where, we typically would have had extended families and, and people and neighborhoods and we're not living like that. And like you say, the reality of South Africa, even though Cape Town's been voted literally hot off the press yesterday, on the number one place to live, or the number one city in the world. There are just some realities that we deal with around safety in our country, and I guess as a parent, safety is a priority irrespective of where you live, anyways. But I think it is around that village, and the reality is it is westernized, it's individualistic, but how do we build that village? And I guess proactively, because I hear you saying, well, I'm noticing this and I'm noticing that, but do we do it proactively as parents? Do we sit down and have this conversation as parents, as partners, and going, well, how do we select people? Like, how do we do and who for us feels right? And so the second thing you spoke about is the values alignment. And even in finding the person to help us with transport, and it's so difficult because, it's not a driver for me. It's so much
Okay.
more. And I know people talk about au pairs, and this isn't an au pair. He's an amazing gentleman who happens to also want flexibility for himself because he's got two young daughters, aged 10 and 8. Um, and he wants time with them. So he's chosen, to drive Ubers. And so it kind of works, for him, and it works for us. But it was in that conversation, I said to him, I said, for me, you're not just driving my child, and this is not an employment type relationship. You become an extended part of our family. And so values alignment is so important because you can have half an hour in the car with my son. These are the things that he likes to speak about. If you see something on the road that maybe, you feel isn't appropriate for you guys to have the conversation, you need to inform me. And just that has been so important. Is that values alignment? Is that I'm entrusting my child to spend time with someone who can be of influence to them,
He
you
will be
know,
of influence to them, yeah.
absolutely. And how I not just I see again this that I language, how we, myself, Mike and Mika as a family, got there. And that was a big thing for us, was
Mm.
we felt that values resonance. He's an amazing dad. I mean, he stops by his children's school when he's got quiet times during his schedule, and he offers to cover books, or he offers, and and he was telling me the story around how he asked, "Can you put me in their class?" And I find it so beautiful, and it really warmed my heart. And we knew we'd found that
Right.
person
Mm.
who shares our values, who understands the importance of parenting, who wants time with their kids. So the day before school started, he didn't work at all. So he took the day off from driving because he wanted the time with his kids, you know. So I think the village is such an important part of things. And I don't think it's something, if I reflect on our experience as parents, um, that we ever sat down and deliberately spoke about. And actually, now as I think about it, I go, well, maybe that's something Mike and I should be speaking about. And once we decide who these people are, even in our network, whether it's a teacher or whatever, it's happened organically. So Mika's got a very good relationship with his Montessori, play school teacher. And even when he wanted to make a decision around changing schools, he asked for time with her. And, again, values aligned. But I'm sitting here going, sure, this is something that Mike and I should actually be sitting down and talking about so we can identify people and then go to those people and say, we would like to lean on you for these things. And it may not be a daily relationship, but when the time comes that they've, what I want to be used as they've been briefed, but they
Yes.
understand the expectations and the role they play.
Correct. And they have a relationship
Yeah,
because, yes, as the kids are getting older, there are certain conversations that they just feel uncomfortable having with us that's going to be easier to have with someone else. And
yeah,
but then in order for them to have that, they would need to be in relationships. So it is about spending time together.
mm,
So you're absolutely right. You're making me think of my son as well, to go who can we start facilitating such a relation? Who can we bring into our life that could become that for him? Because yes, I have that for my daughter now, and I know that she often hears the tea about the crush before I do even. But yeah, to become deliberate about ensuring that my son also has someone like that, a
yeah,
responsible adult outside of the immediate family that would be a
yeah,
safe and responsible person to be there for him.
yeah,
Um, and yeah,
yeah,
sometimes we're lucky and fate sends the right person to us, but there's also nothing wrong with us identifying someone. And yeah, as I'm listening to you now, I'm also realizing there's just something about that other male figure for your son, as
yeah,
I'm suddenly realizing just seeing his aggression levels on the road and how does he respond to peak traffic. I mean, that's a significant that's a significant thing to trust someone with. And so, yeah, that role model that he will become, and ultimately, yeah, you will already almost now, when in that
Mm.
decision, set him up to have that other go-to male adult
Yeah.
that he will have to that will speak into his life in a different way, but in a significant way, other than his
Yeah.
father.
Yeah.
Um, so
Absolutely.
where in the beginning I listened to your story and I was going, oh, it would be hard for me. Now I'm actually sitting in a bit of jealousy. I'm going, oh, that's such a great idea. I wish my son had that. And so thank you for sharing. And yeah, what felt like a dilemma is now, I guess, an opportunity of something beautiful.
It is. And I think you said something where you said, and fate delivers. And, I have a very spiritual side, not religious, but I believe in the universe and guidance. And, when I felt like the time was right, I mean, it was such a chance thing, Rensha. We were at a friend's place and there was a person, there that Mika just connected with. And I said to him, you don't by any chance have like a friend in Cape Town, and he says, actually, I do. And that's how it ended up in the conversations, etc. But I think the highlight for me, an affirmation of my decision,
Yeah.
a relief, was when Mika got out the car. So yesterday, for the first time, his dad drove with him, and coming back, it was just the two of them alone. And they got out the car, and I went to the car to receive him, and I was like, "Hey, Mika, how was the day at school?" And and the gentleman had gotten a new car, so Mika was the first one to have a ride, and they had like a thing going on. It was so nice to
Mm.
observe. And as Mika hopped out the car, this gentleman came around, and I'm deliberately not using his name here. Came around and stood at the door. And I said to Mika, "Hey, where's my high hug?" And he jumped out the car and he actually went to hug the gentleman
Oh,
first,
oh,
goodbye.
wow.
And then he
Wow.
came to hug me. And like my heart sang because, you read the energy of the situation. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. And I mean, touch wood, I'm hoping it all works out because it's literally only the first week. But I think you're so right around building that village, identifying people proactively, deliberately, for our kids who will play a role of influence in their life. And I go back to the responsibility and I link it to that. And I go with the westernization, with the individualistic ways that we use, that's part of what contributes to this sits with me, you know? And for us as moms, and I think it's starting to grow, and I go back to the research around, that circle of, the support that we have and looking at our partners, where your hubby stepped up and said, hold on, I'm sticking, let's do it this way, where Mike stepped up and I don't want to say stepped up because that almost sounds like they don't usually, but became part of the solution where it showed us and mirrored to us, hold on, why are you handling this by yourself? Like we can do this together. Um, and said, hey, I'll go today. And then, the coach, and the driver and the teacher, um, really just starting to create this beautiful thing. And even as I speak into it, I'm noticing how I'm feeling and in my body and in my spirit, and I'm going, I feel ease and I feel relaxation and I feel support. And when I compare that with how I usually feel in my role as a mom, it's not that. And I'm wondering how much of that, and again, without saying that there aren't other influences like socialization, like society, lots of other external things. I'm coming back to what's the internal stuff that sits with me that I can start to shift. And I'm so glad that both you and I have shared examples here where something internally within us has started to shift,
Mm.
where we've opened up and we're allowing the help and support in. And fortunately, I'm in the position that we can do that.
Right. Yeah. Sure. Thank you, Sarika. Yeah, I think there's so much that I'm taking out of this conversation today. And you've underlined it for me beautifully now. If you ask, if you kind of invite, you've done it, and I'm inviting myself in to do the same, to feel what does that feel like when I can connect with these possibilities, as opposed to just when I was so connected to feeling the problem and it was my problem. And that contrast, knowing nothing in the situation has changed.
Mm.
Situation is exactly the same, yet it can be such two fundamentally different felt experiences. And then if I play that back and go, what needed to shift in me in order for that felt experience to shift? And so for me personally, it is about reframing it to not be my problem, but to be a problem, creating a little bit of distance between me. And then something you've just given me through how I've transitioned through this conversation is not to see it as what would happen if I didn't see it as a problem, but if I saw it as an opportunity,
Mm.
because
Mm.
that is that where, yeah, I think there's the excitement also. So it's not just ease, there's excitement and expectancy that I'm sensing if I'm feeling the second part of me. And
Yeah.
so yes, letting go of the obsession to control it and to get it right, is
Mm.
step one for me. And then there's the igniting of the what could be exciting about this,
Yeah.
and stepping into the opportunity, which then unlocks my creativity to problem solve from a
Mm.
different perspective. And so those two tools is what I'm taking out of
Mm.
our conversation today, and what I will be utilizing, and all the practical small little micro challenges that has the capacity to eat away at my emotional capacity to do life, when it
Yeah.
feels like I'm being pulled into a million different directions. So I've got my tools after today's conversation, and I look forward to coming back to reflect on them again around whether they worked or not, or how I've refined them. And yeah, I'm just wondering whether
Mm.
any takeouts have crystallized for you, or whether you maybe want to take a few minutes to reflect on that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm happy to speak into it because, I often speak to think. Um, I think my first reflection is how this conversation is very different to the kind of catch up we had before, and the energy feels very different and almost subdued in a way compared to the actual intensity of what we were talking into. When we just checked in and touched base with one another. And I think I just want to share that with the people listening, is to go, no, we're not all together and got the solutions. We had a debrief before, and we're actually feeling a lot of emotional intensity around things. So we dealt with that in our pre-conversation almost. So I feel like that's something important that I wanted to share, that I reflected on. But in terms of the actual content of our conversation, again, we didn't know where it was going, right? We kind of just said, let's deal with what's in the room right now. And I think my reflection is, around the responsibility and again, the ability to respond doesn't mean that I'm the one that needs to be the person that takes action. And I think that's what I'm taking out of it is, look, based on our lives and the economic kind of standard that you and I live in, our village is also involving paid support. We have the privilege that we're able to do that, and I think finding the right people, like you say, from a values perspective, but also allowing that letting go. You talked about control, and I have it, and it's the guilt. It's like, why do I need to have somebody come in and clean my house for an hour in the mornings? Like, shouldn't that be something I do? And there's the economic and the South African context, and all of that sits with me, and the guilt that sits with me around it. And I think that allowing myself to just let go and go, no, it's not mine to do alone. And whatever the solutions I choose, and whatever the solutions you choose, or any of our other people listening to us choose, that's okay if it works for your family. And I love what you said around thinking around the opportunity that it's building and creating for your child, for yourself, and for the other people that are supporting you, paid or not paid. Where's the gift
Mm.
that's gracing all of you, through what you're building. And I think that's probably the thing that's sitting with me the most is shifting my perspective um, around responsibility and then also the opportunity. Yeah. And I think as we maybe close it, just for the people listening, um, is maybe to sit with those questions as well.
Mm.
Is to take some time because it doesn't just pop up, right? It comes through these kind of conversations. So to take some time or create some space um, to think about that and reflect on that for your life. Everybody's situation's different. The gentleman who's helping us with the driving, his situation's different, and yet I look at how he's showing up and the solutions he's putting in place because I had those conversations with him. Um, and I think the sharing, sorry, the
Sharing.
last point, sharing, because that you've inspired me and I've inspired you through the communications and conversations we've had. The gentleman has inspired me around some of the things he does, around things I could do differently, and where I can allow myself to ease the guilt and the responsibility. So I think that sharing so that we all know we're in it together.
And my last contribution to that is just to discern what we share. Because I see, if I look at the school WhatsApp groups, people are very easy to share about the problems and the frustrations. And that, I don't know about you, but that does not help me. In actual fact, it doesn't make me feel better. It's sharing, when I'm sharing about solutions, about how am I processing this? And yes, there's a few people close to me where I will also share about how hard it is, but the broader community, there's no point in sharing how hard it is if that's where the conversation stays. There,
Yeah,
I instead want to compare and share notes on how can we resolve this? What are you doing? How could this look different? So that, yeah, that there's just a discernment for me around what we
yeah,
choose to share. What do we give our energy to? Because that which we give our energy to will grow. And if we just keep sharing about the problems, that grows.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's
I
not
think
something I want to feed.
Yeah, I think the wolf you feed is the one that grows and survives, right? Um, I hear you on that, and I feel like you've touched on something important by saying, where you share. So I do think the sharing is important off the load, off the
Yeah.
problem as well. But I think what you're speaking into is there are certain places for you to share that. And I think what happens on WhatsApp groups and stuff is that, we go into a spiral. Then, and it's a social
Mm.
media thing, all the naysayers and negativity comes in. And I think to our point of sharing is yes, share so we can share the load, but you're really correct in what I was talking about around the sharing is let's share with one another how we're dealing with it, how we're coping, what are the options, what are the opportunities.
Yeah.
Because I've definitely taken out some stuff from you and from the gentleman, and I'm putting that into practice, in my life, and I'm hoping that the people listening also, find some kind of inspiration to, either out of this conversation or through conversations that they'll have around how are you doing it? What can I learn from that?
Thank you again, Sarika. Look forward to the next one.
Yeah, I'm so glad we chose to have this conversation and we allowed it to be organic. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Rensha. Till next time.